The presentation is scheduled to run for 50 minutes with an additional 10 minutes for questions and answers. Please note that all attendees will receive a link to a recording of this webinar and the accompanying slides in an email within a few days. Once the webinar has finished, a brief survey will launch, and we ask that you please complete it. We want to know what other topics we can address for you in the future. Please remember that certified export specialists and certified custom specialists are eligible for 1 CES or CCS credit for attending today's webinar. If you haven't logged your NEI, CCS, or CES ID number upon registration, please email it to infospot@roanoke group.com. Before we get started, I'd like to tell you how you can interact with us today. Throughout the webinar, we encourage you to type your questions into the questions box in the control panel at the right of your screen. We'll answer as many questions as time allows during and at the end of the presentation. And now it is my pleasure to introduce today's presenters, Captain Sam Wadhwani, Mr. Jeff Hall, and Mr. Curtis Salisbury of Trade Risk Management. Combined, these gentlemen each have over 40 years of experience in claims adjusting and cargo theft investigation. Transit Risk Management specializes in surveying, adjusting, investigating, and recoveries of all types of claims from cargo to white-collar losses. We are thrilled to have these gentlemen present today's webinar, and without further ado, I will turn the webinar over to Captain Sam Wadhwani.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, all panelists. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We're going to address Think Like a Criminal, so we're going to take away your thoughts and tell you how the criminal mind works. The three topics, of course, there are many ways, but the three topics that we're going to cover here in this presentation, which is only about 50 minutes long, is cybercrime, insurance fraud, and disappearing act. Disappearing act is also part of insurance fraud, as you will see. Okay. The first is cybercrime. Okay. We all know that internet is taking over traditional ways of doing business. It's picking up in volume. We know that from various sites, eBay and Amazon, and what have you, Craigslist, and hence the issues around it also pick up simultaneously. Time follows money, we know that. And the other thing that internet provides is anonymity, which allows the criminals to hide and not show their true identities. Okay. Here's a trend that shows from 2008 to 2017 the percentage of retail business that is done online. From 2008, from 3.5%, it has grown to almost 9%. And the trend is clearly going up quite steadily and will continue to grow. Okay. This is a very important photograph, and courtesy of Allianz, we can see that we are interconnected with just about everything that we do online. So our home computers and tablets and phones could be connected to public services, banks and insurers, to service providers, to delivery agents like FedEx and UPS, to credit card providers and what have you. So from our phone, we can probably access any of the others if one knows how to go about it, which scares the living daylights out of me, at least, because I don't know who all can see me. And right now, we've lost that ability. We used to be able to safeguard our information, but with this sort of, okay. Now, including the data breaches. We've all heard about the latest one, which is Equifax. And of course, we had to go into our personal accounts and stop anyone from getting any additional credit on our accounts. I'm sure you guys have all taken your own positive steps to stop being infiltrated. Did we know, though, that in this year we've had 1,300 data breaches? We hear only about the big ones, but there are a lot of small ones and multiple ones that occur every day. So data protection legislation, as a result, will toughen because we are still in the infancy of internet and online connections. So with passage of time, those will increase. More notifications and significant fines will be placed on data breaches in the future, I'm sure. The other issue is that the business interruption and intellectual property theft and cyber extortion is also increasing. With business interruption and these type of breaches, the size of the loss also increases quite a bit. Okay. As one can see, industrial control systems poses a significant threat. It could be an electric grid, it could be a water supply system, it could be anything. Secrets and espionage securities around the world. There is no silver bullet for cybersecurity. As we all know, it's it's in its infancy. So with that, we haven't caught up with how to protect ourselves all the time, and the fines and penalties haven't caught up with it. Foreign hacktivism, we all know about political and social hacktivism. They're difficult to track. You can't just, it's not a simple investigation as the old detective would go out and gather evidence. It's very difficult to track, and people can hide, like we said, being anonymous and provide false IP addresses and what have you. So it's very difficult to identify. It's therefore difficult to stop and to prosecute. Okay. Cyber risk is the most underestimated by businesses. Now, we were introduced to terrorism not too distant past, but terrorism is down at 6%, whereas cyber risk is now 29% unpreparedness. Okay. Now, what do you currently do based on our sophistication at this stage? Make cybersecurity a top all stakeholders planning and decision in the planning and decision making. We have to identify vulnerabilities if we are going to have any chance of stopping it. We have to have a crisis response team, a mechanism. So we used to do this for fire and flood and earthquake and those type of things. We've got to include cybercrime. Implement cybersecurity procedures and policies. It's a natural, it's a given. Monitor third-party participation. This is where a lot of us fail because, you know, networking and communication is how business is done these days. And when a third party sends an email or sends a thumb drive or gives you something, then that becomes difficult to control. Use extreme cautions in mergers and acquisitions. When two large corporations merge, then you have all the problems from one can infiltrate the data of the other. Okay. I just mentioned removable devices. So of course the CD is almost old news, but thumb drives and any other devices that you connect to computers, many companies will not even accept those anymore. Downloading and opening attachments. Beware of people phishing for type of thing. Keep them often and use professionals to monitor cloud storages and home devices. A lot of people also work from home, and those home devices can be used to surf the net and can get infiltrated with problems, and then you connect it to the office. That's a very easy source that can infiltrate a business. Malware protection, of course, everyone knows about, and create channels to ID points of infiltration and address and mitigate them. And of course, you're going to have meetings about this because people need to be educated on this. Okay. Periodic training of employees and network partners is most important. Implement a procedure to review operating station server systems. We do that in a small office of ours, where every month we have all our systems checked and reviewed to make sure we don't have any off privileges. Do not forget the ability of perpetrators to use social engineering. We talked about phishing very briefly, but phishing is a problem even to me. I'll get an invoice, unpaid invoice, and I might send it to my accounts payable, and they might click on it, and the entire system and the server gets contaminated. So that's a problem. So we have to be very careful in what we open, and be careful. There are a lot of people trying to get our information. Domains can easily fool us because people can change emails very easily. And if I add INC at the end of my email, nobody knows that it's not from Transit Risk Management. Telemarketers and cold calls can be phishing activities. And always, if possible, we've gone into cell phones, we've gone into VoIP calls, and we've gone into all those type of things, but landlines are the most reliable even today. Okay. We're going to go into case review number 1, and I'm going to hand this over to my colleague, Jeff Hall.
Thanks, Sam, and thanks everybody for joining us today. We do several cases a year, and we try to pick ones that are very factual but also entertaining. The issues will be popping up on your screen. You can read along. I'm kind of going to do a condensed Reader's Digest version of all this. What this case dealt with was a Nigerian cyber crime group that had targeted different businesses electronically. Some computers were sent to Long Beach State, and they went to 2 different warehouses and delivered and says, hey, I'm supposed to take those. So he takes them off the dock and disappears, and another one was down at a warehouse in another town. It was hardly too much of that case because they're dealing with different jurisdictions, but that's what introduces this. So when we get this case in, this is on a larger scale. What these guys would do is they'll go online, and the purchase orders for these goods for a lot of major universities are public information, and they're on there. So they can get a blank PO filled out, send it to a manufacturer that manufactures a certain product. On this one here, I think it was actually Diagnostic Computers that was sent to a company out in California, which consequently recognized it was coming from the University of Pennsylvania making the request, so that, of course, they filled the order and shipped it via FedEx. Next. Okay. I did that because I wanted to show you, here's what the purchase order looked like, which is legitimate, or appears to be legitimate. Okay? And here's one that we caught. On the original PO, what these guys had done is they would put an address on there going to the University of Pennsylvania that was somewhat accurate. It might have the right street, but the numeric address might have been off a digit or two. Plus the telephone number they listed to contact in the event of an issue was a voice over IP that they were monitoring. So when the UPS driver actually went to deliver the goods to the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, they had to call that number. And the guy said, oh, I don't think it's that address. We've got an alternate address in a warehouse in Trenton, New Jersey to take it to. And this had happened a couple of times. So I flew to Philadelphia, went to Penn, met the detective that was part of campus police. He said this happens all the time. It's a problem. There's nothing we can do about it. We've tried to investigate it. The FBI knows all about it. So I met the FBI in Washington, D.C., and we talked at length about this, and they educated me on what exactly was going on. Over 85 companies and 250 vendors had been victims of this, 85 universities and companies combined, and with 250 vendors, and for a total loss of $5 million. This is big-time organized crime. And again, there was very much limitations on what they could do. And on a number of these cases, we noticed that these goods were being shipped to a warehouse in Trenton, New Jersey. So I asked the FBI, I just said, what about the warehouse? These good guys or bad guys? And he said, well, we don't know. Nobody's ever been there. I said, okay, I'll take care of that in the morning. I'll go down and meet with these people. So I did. I went down there, and it was a normal dock operation, kind of the seedy part of town in Trenton, and found that his son was running the business, but his dad was really more the administrator. So I met with the dad. And so I walk into the office. He goes, man, Jeff, I've been waiting for you guys to come. I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, this has been going on for a while. And he said, we get these pallets of goods will arrive, and then I get an electronic message. It's always electronic, nothing ever telephonic. It tells me that there'll be shipping labels will be coming. Go ahead and put the labels on it. We'll arrange for DHL to come by and pick it up. And then the goods were being shipped to some warehouse over in the United Kingdom. And I said, well, are you getting paid? He says, that's it. We always get paid. We've never been short of money. He said, the only thing that was off on one, he said, was the weight balance of the goods being shipped did not match. And I told the guy, hey, I'm not going to pay your freight charges. And this is all done electronically. And so the guy said, don't worry about it. DHL will take care of it, which we found to be very mysterious. Well, it just so happened, he said, Jeff, I just got an email from this guy. He wants to send another pallet of goods. I said, fantastic. He said, so you got an open line of communication with this guy right now? He said, yeah. I said, fine, let's set this guy up. So what we, kind of fast forwarding, what we did was got a tracking device. We were going to load a pallet of fake goods with the same weight and then send it. I called the FBI and asked if they'd get involved, and they said, no, it's kind of complicated, and no, we're going to do it. But they said, what do you plan to prove by this? And I said, well, this has been going on for a while. There's been other manufacturers. I know Hewlett-Packard had issues with this before. They go and push it so far. So if we put a tracking device on these goods, would be set up, it would give us, it provide us with a breadcrumb trail farther than we've ever went before. And she said, well, that's exactly right. The FBI just agreed. She said, well, I'll tell you what, if you do that, please keep us advised. I said, no problem. So that was what our plan was. But when we started looking into this, it gets very, very complicated. I worked with Customs on this, and if, just say, for example, that we substitute the diagnostic computers that we'd put bricks in there that had the same weight. And then when Customs got that and found out that we were sending the shipment was actually fraudulent, it was not what was on the paperwork, the BOLs, then we would be charged with fraud. Plus, we ran into the issue, if we're going to put a tracking device that's going to go into foreign countries, without their approval, we could get charged with espionage. So that's why when you talk to federal officials and Customs, there's ways to do this, but it's so involved with paperwork and subpoenas and court orders and Interpol and involving diplomats that it just never gets done. However, in this particular case, because of what we've done, we intercepted the product and got it back to the client, and which he was most grateful because the load was a very, very high dollar value. So this is a type of crime that goes on all the time, and also it becomes a problem because when I came up with the idea, the FBI was very, very involved. Matter of fact, I had a young agent call me and say, hey, Jeff, I'll help you with whatever we can, whatever we're going to do. Then we start getting into the complexities involved, and you go, this is very simple, and I just don't have time to get involved in. And unfortunately, that's the pitfalls of these Nigerian scams, because they know that because of the protection they have being abroad, there's certain limitations. But in this particular case, it worked out very well for our client.
This is Sam. Jeff also figured out by doing inquiries, not by tracking. Like he said, if you put a tracking device, it could be an espionage charge. So he did figure out, though, that there was an operative out of Houston controlling this and paying the warehouse in Trenton, New Jersey, ordering on false purchase orders that he had gotten hold of from universities and not paying the vendors who are providing these things. And then when it got to Trenton, or when it got diverted to Trenton because of the VoIP telephone number and addresses, they would send it to the UK, and the UK would send it to Nigeria. And then the Nigerian folks in organized crime would collect it and then use it, and they just got a free piece of equipment. Now, this can start to extend in armaments and what have you, and can get very dangerous. So the FBI does know about it already. But in this particular case, we were able to stop it, which people were very happy with.
Also, when Sam mentioned this guy was an interesting character named Bubba Lee, and even addressed some of the shipments to Dr. Bravo Lee to certain universities. And that sense, the guy operated out of Houston. And of course, it went through the usual. Everything he had supplied information to the warehouse in New Jersey. I checked out. I mean, they gave an address in downtown Philadelphia where they operated out of. Of course, it was a bank building. We'd never heard of them. They'd never had a business there. The whole thing, everything about them was fraudulent. But how we tied into this particular topic today is because everything this guy did was electronic. Everything. He only used the internet on everything that he did.
So it was difficult to catch him. Okay.
Okay.
So the second case involves insurance fraud. Okay. And this is an interesting case. It involved a criminal enterprise to collect insurance money by substituting product at origin. So Jeff just mentioned putting bricks instead of the actual equipment. Well, this is exactly what this guy did. And I'll tell you how the investigation progressed and how we got some cues and pointers as to whether we are moving in the right direction or not. As you can imagine, when you get a case, you don't know if the allegation that's being made is true or false. You don't know if the guy is a good guy or a bad guy. He's a victim or is he the perpetrator. You don't know that. The guy says, hey, I shipped a bunch of iPhones and it arrived at destination with bricks and I'm out $5.7 million. That's a problem. So he ships it from Seattle to Newcastle. first question, of course, that comes into mind is, why is he shipping iPhones? Why can't he go to the Apple store, to a AT&T store and buy one? I mean, it's not like he's going to get a discount. So we couldn't figure that out. That bothered us for a couple of months in our investigation because we couldn't figure out the gray market of Apple phones. And we had to get an answer to that, and the correct answer to that, in order for us to be on the right track. Well, we did figure it out. We found out that in some of the Arab countries, they do not allow FaceTime. So when you buy a phone locally over there, you don't get FaceTime loaded up. As we all know, there are religious reasons for that. So they were buying European and American phones so that they had FaceTime on it, and that's where the gray market flourished. Okay. With that information, it still didn't mean he was doing anything bad or fraudulent. I mean, gray market exists, such is the nature of our life. So that's just the map showing where it was going. Okay. So this gentleman allegedly, or actually said he packed the cell phones from his parents' garage in a city called Linwood in the Seattle area. And he himself packed it, and he had the cell phones, and he's in the cell phone business. He gave us some evidence and some proof of that. And but he had purchased these cell phones. They were all the previous model cell phones. So when the 6 Plus had come out, these were the 5s and the 4s, and he had packed them, and these are the boxes. He's showing how he packed them. Okay. So these are the actual bags that were placed in the boxes. These look like Apple bags. The circles that you see over there, we're trying to point out that they're not really Apple bags. They're made to look like Apple bags. They were specially manufactured. The drawstrings were much longer and thicker, and there was this unusual M that was written on the bags that didn't feature on the Apple bags. So we had to go through these photographs very carefully. Okay. The other thing that piqued our interest was he shipped this by FedEx for $60,000 from Seattle to Delaware. If he had gotten a full trailer load, he could have done it for $5,000. That doesn't make any business sense to us. And we were scratching our head. FedEx takes 2 days to get there, and LTL may take 3 days to get there. What's the big deal? This was a red flag. We couldn't exactly understand it, so we put a red flag to it. Okay. So we asked the claimant, or the beneficiary in this case, to provide us with photographs. We got our IT forensics involved in it, and we did a metadata check, and we found out that the photographs had been taken with an Asahi Pentax camera in Australia in 2013. These weren't his photographs of the phones. So all the photographs of the packaging materials were correct with the date and where they were taken and so on and so forth. All the photographs with the phones were old. Metadata showed they were old photographs from the internet. So with that, we knew now that we are now teetering towards the fraudulent aspect. But at the same time, we have to go about proving it. We also came to the realization that he probably never had these iPhones with him. And then we checked his claim history and found out he has made various other claims on similar type of things where he says he opened the box and he got something different in it. Until the time he was a receiver, it was difficult to prove that he had done something wrong. When he became the shipper, now we can get from him, where did you buy the packing, where I show us the receipts, how did you pack it, what did you do, etc. And that's how we got. And he was using his parents' garage to do all this. Okay. So what he did, the reason he used FedEx is because FedEx will accept the weight that you declare at the time of shipment. And then when they go to their Memphis hub, they will alter the weights sometimes to show the actual weights of the cartons. So he knew this procedure. That is why he went FedEx and not FTL. And when he saw the change in weights, he says, somebody has tampered with my shipment. He made a complaint to FedEx. Then he flew to Delaware and he went to inspect 4 cartons out of the 116 cartons that he had shipped, and all 4 had bricks in them, these concrete bricks, as you can see in the photograph. Okay. Now, we attempted to get in touch with FedEx. We were representing the first-party insurer, but FedEx didn't want to cooperate with us because they had a $5.7 million claim against them. So their legal department didn't want us to come in. However, we got industry sources to give us good contact at FedEx, and the FedEx investigator turned out to be a jewel. He helped us out. He's a retired officer from here in Southern California. And although they denied us access to the actual cartons, he sent us good photographs of the bricks. Okay, so this slide will show you the photographs as compared to a dollar bill, gives us a good kind of comparison and the size and what have you. So this one, and okay, on the next one, we have another photograph. Now, as you can see, there's a uniqueness to this brick. So this piqued our interest as well. We said, okay, this does not look like a brick to build a wall and what have you. So we investigated this further, okay, and we contacted some industry sources, okay, and we found out that this brick is a lighter brick than a concrete brick because it's got pumice in it. And our contact in Seattle was another retired officer who knew retail very well. And he said his sources had told him that there's only one place that sells these bricks, these pumice bricks, in the Bellevue, Seattle area, and it's a company called Mutual Materials. And they had 2 branches, and then, okay, and we found out that the branch, one branch, the main branch, was right opposite where the suspect or the shipper lived. So it shows the building, the penthouse that the suspect occupied, by the way. And it also shows on the map below where the suspect is, the claimant's residence, and right across the freeway is Mutual Materials, and Home Depot is right there, but he went to Mutual Materials. Okay. With that information, we actually met the suspect. This is the suspect. And he took us to Home Depot and Lowe's, and we couldn't find the bricks. But by this time, we already knew where to find the bricks. Okay. And this slide will show you where we found the bricks at Mutual Materials. Those were the pumice bricks. And that gentleman over there, who's one of the salespeople, was showing us that. Okay. We also got a receipt that he signed when he picked up the bricks 2 days before he packed and shipped the goods. So once we got that, we were able to figure out, okay, now we've got a link, we've got the smoking gun. Okay. We then learned about monies he had, he claims he had filed against Apple, and we actually visited Apple in Cupertino. We shared our findings with them because it involved their product, and they were very gracious, very welcoming, and usually we wouldn't have even gotten to see them, but with the information that we had, we thought, we want to stop this because he might turn around and do it again. So we shared our information with them, and they were very happy and thankful about it. Thank you.
And this guy here, the interesting thing about this guy is Sammy showed you the picture a while ago. This guy was, just to make your day, this guy was a 26-year-old Iranian kid. There was a business grad major from University of Washington. He had skyboxes at the Seahawks games, skyboxes at University of Washington Huskies football games, and had 3 different Ferraris, a red one, a white one, and a blue one, the top-of-the-line Range Rover SUV, the top-of-the-line Mercedes sedan, and he lived in a 11,000 square foot, $12 million penthouse in Bellevue, which if people are familiar with Washington, with Seattle, Washington, is the equivalent to Beverly Hills in California. And his next door neighbor was Russell Wilson, the Seahawks quarterback. When I flew up there to go to Linwood and interview this guy, he invited me up to his penthouse, and he was one of the most friendly, engaging chaps you ever want to meet. Very nice guy. Well, that night after I met him, the FBI visited me in my hotel room for 2 hours. We came up and talked, and we went through about 10 questions. I kept getting, no, can't answer that, no, can't answer that, Jeff. Jeff, you're on the right path, no, Jeff, you're on the right path. So I finally said, look, I said, one quick question. I said, is this guy a good guy or a bad guy? And they said, he's a very bad guy. So that's all we need to know. So then, like I said, we got the cooperation of law enforcement, and Sammy and I put together the case and proved it. And this guy, the reason FBI was involved is they had their own investigation going on at the same time, and it was for bank fraud. So he was convicted on the bank fraud plus our case. So I think the way the FBI scheduled, I think he ended up getting 15 years in federal penitentiary. I'll turn it over now to our colleague Curtis Salisbury.
Curtis Salisbury. Curtis, if I may introduce him, he is fluent in English, just about, but also speaks fluent Spanish and Portuguese. So he does a lot of investigations around here in the U.S. and Canada, but also specializes in Latin America and South America. Curtis.
Thank you. Nice to be with you folks today. This disappearing act, case number 3, as you can see on the screen, this case involves a loss at sea, presumed deceased, in a manner to collect an insurance payout. It's the type of fraud case that was very interesting, and actually no one died in this case. It turned out to be kind of a fun case to investigate. And next slide. It's interesting on our initial review of the matter was that the individual was spotted on a community Facebook page in Rio Dulce, Guatemala. Now, Rio Dulce is on the eastern side of the country, and once you get to Rio Dulce, what you're doing is you're going to an area where everything is water taxi, from Puerto Barrios back down up into Rio Dulce and Alexander. All of that is water taxi. So when you go on your investigation, you're traveling by water taxi. What's interesting about this is that on August of 2014, we received the reference and assignment, and were instructed to investigate the disappearance of Michael. Michael had a 36-foot Benetel 361 sailboat watercraft. He was believed to have been in Rio Dulce area of Guatemala in the eastern part of the country. The watercraft and captain were originally reported missing in October of 2011 and were last seen off the coast of Port Canaveral, Florida, September 15th, 2011. What's interesting about this yacht is when this gentleman was out at sea off the coast of Port Canaveral, he flagged down the Coast Guard for the Coast Guard to board his vessel. And when they boarded his vessel, he was just asking if he had proper safety equipment. And we discovered that was a very odd request. Why would you hail the Coast Guard if you just want to check on some safety issues? The Coast Guard advised him he shouldn't be out on the boat alone. He was alone. And, of course, his brother had reported his disappearance. Okay. First, when I saw this picture, you're all going to chuckle a little bit. But when we traveled to Rio Dulce, Guatemala, we visited a few bars in the area. Through the intelligence received by principals, one of the individuals who frequent the bar is this gentleman, who is known as Portside Tom. Now, originally, I thought he was an actor from Pirates of the Caribbean, but I thought I would never see this guy, to be candid with you. I thought there's no way I'm going to find this guy, especially the way he's dressed. Ironically, and surprisingly, I was dead wrong. We went around the different bars in the area. We tried to find individuals, and I found out that there was a particular area where a lot of Americans hung out to watch Sunday football games. Okay. So this is the crew. And what's funny about this is, if you'll notice at the bottom, there really is a Portside Tom. And he is, as the cartoon character projects, a pirate with an eye patch. He is a retired high school chemistry teacher and had decided to relocate. You'll notice that there's Portside Tom, Ponytail John, Chef Willie. The only person who gave his actual name is a retired detective who's just retired down there with his police pension. So a lot of these folks have, let's say, interesting backgrounds or different issues as to why they're down there, but nobody was going by a first and last name basis. Please note the detective to the far right with the fourth arrow to the right, and we'll talk about him in a moment. As you look at Portside Tom, the pirate, I was surprised that morning, on a Sunday morning during the football season, he walks in the bar. I was introduced to him by Chef Willie, the third arrow. As Portside Tom sits at the bar, I'm not a drinker, but I started buying him drinks. I bought him vodka tonics, beer, just about anything I could, and she kept serving me tonic water. And what I did was I had to get in the conversation about this missing person we were looking for. Portside Tom was recorded as his best friend by the principals. So I took a Facebook shot that came from Real Dulce's website on the Facebook site for Real Dulce community, put it up on the screen on my phone, and I had one of those big Samsung phones. I set it up in between Portside Tom and myself as he was drinking. I told them that I was in the medical field visiting from Mexico City, had never been to Real Dulce, and Tom looks at me and said, I thought that this was your first time to Guatemala. And I said, well, yes, it is. He said, how come you got a picture of my buddy so-and-so here? And I said, well, that's just off the website, and I pinched it down, and he started talking about his best friend and how I needed to meet him, and that he was out doing some fishing and a very interesting guy. Okay. So the individual that we were looking for, his real name is Michael Britt, and he was allegedly had been lost at sea. His brother had reported, as I previously mentioned, and someone had tipped off the principals that he was down there. And of course, after a little bit of alcohol and some meals, if you remember Jim, the detective there, he overhears me talking to everybody, and he tells me to come on over, and he says, hey, are you who you say you are? And he kind of figured it out as a detective because he saw that I was buying alcohol but drinking tonic water. And the interesting point of this matter is that he said, I know just who you're looking for, and for steak and eggs in the morning, I'll take you right to the bay where his yacht's parked. So the very next morning, I met the detective. We went over there, found the manager, let the manager know that we were either going to get on the yacht to identify some of the individual's belongings and his ID, or we could contact Guatemalan authorities and let them come and search all the boats on his marina. Of course, he agreed, let us come in, and we were able to identify that Mr. Michael Britt was going by an assumed name using someone else's passport. The case was resolved. He had sold the original yacht and had moved in a different yacht, and this, of course, was identified by the marina manager. It was a very interesting case, a lot of twists and turns, and if it weren't for the great intel provided by principals and that picture of the guy from Pirates of the Caribbean, we would have never found this guy, and it was a very successful case.
And like Curtis said, this is Sam, that before he even went down there, he created a full file and had copious notes on this. And he was wondering, why did he invite the Coast Guard to look at his security equipment or safety equipment? And that was all a ruse, so that people could then say, or the Coast Guard had a log that they had met this guy, and it was very possible that he could have become lost at sea. And that was the whole scam, that call the Coast Guard, identify you're there, so that way, and then when it was reported, then of course we got the intelligence that he's in Guatemala, and Curtis worked his wonder. And, you know, sometimes I ask them, how did he go down there and track this one guy? And that phone that he put out there with his photograph sitting at the bar, I thought that was ingenious, that somebody comes and says, hey, I know, this is my buddy, how do you know him? You're here for the first time. So I thought that was a great investigation. Insurers were just thrilled to bits. Thank you, guys. So, okay.
Okay, thank you, Captain Sam, Jeff, and Curtis. Thank you for a very thought-provoking presentation. And before we get to our questions, and please feel free to use the chat box to enter any questions that you may have for our panelists. Let me remind you that The recording of today's webinar and the slides will come to you within a couple of days. Now is a good time to answer your questions using the questions pane on the right side of your GoToWebinar viewer. Also, please remember to complete the survey that will launch at the end of this presentation. Sam, I wanted to ask you, well, first of all, thank you, you guys, for doing this presentation, and it's very clear that you guys go into a lot of detail and a lot of investigative work to whether it's cargo theft or whether it's cyber or somebody alleging insurance fraud with the boat. Obviously, a lot of this stuff that you deal with is considered a victimless crime. And while you're working with the FBI and local law enforcement, whether it's LAPD or Bad Cats or somebody in Florida, what do you guys sense, or what is your biggest frustration at this stage when it comes to law enforcement? Obviously, cybercrime has become a big one, but when it comes to cargo, and we know that cargo theft is a big problem right now throughout the U.S. How are you guys coping with this? Obviously, you only have a handful of investigators. You seem to get the majority of the losses. How are you guys coping with all that?
That's a great question, Glenn. First of all, I want to thank you, thank Roanoke, thank Teresa and Kim and all the attendees. This is not my problem. This is not your problem. This is our problem. We solve it together. Just not, and while we work closely with Roanoke, we work closely with various other insurers. Jeff has a unique ability where he's built up a great network. Law enforcement is on our side. No ifs, ands, or buts. They have their own frustrations. Like I had said before, law enforcement's job is to solve crime. Our job is to reduce losses. We have to meet somewhere in the middle. So we work closely with them. The problem that we face and that law enforcement faces is they have time limitations and they cannot do overtime, and they have all those type of things that handcuff them. We have expenditure that handcuffs us. The other part of it is that once they catch these people, sometimes the DAs and the prosecutors want much easier and smoother cases. So these are complicated. To understand insurance and transportation and put them together and then prosecute somebody is a very difficult and challenging task for a DA who knows nothing about marine cargo or inland marine or whatever. So the sentencing should be given attention to, and the local, state, and federal level legislation needs to be revised, where people who commit these type of crimes need to be put away for a while. When they get 6 months or a slap on the hand, that is very frustrating for law enforcement. Saying that, we all face our frustrations. Law enforcement gets frustrated with us. We get frustrated with them. But Jeff has a unique ability. He knows, Jeff, your call, you know what, about maybe 70, 80 cargo crime officers in U.S. and Canada?
Just to educate the people today, you might not know this, but just to piggyback on what Sammy was talking about, there's about approximately 100 officers throughout the United States who are trained in the nuances of cargo theft. That's nationwide. You've got a limited amount of task forces. Just going from west to east, you've got 3 in the state of California, the city of LA, the county of LA, and you've got the state, which is CTIP. Then you don't have another cargo theft task force in Chicago, which is down to a one-man unit. Then you go to Memphis, Tennessee. Then you go to GBI in Atlanta, Georgia Bureau of Investigations, then into Florida. That's it. The rest of these guys, like if you have, and I'm not disparaging any law enforcement for these cities, but if you have a cargo theft in Indianapolis or Kansas City or St. Louis, Des Moines, Iowa, those guys, they don't have trained cargo theft detectives. Where we're lucky is we know all of them because we've had fortunate for our client base. We have investigations throughout North America and traveled all these places, got to know all these guys. We go to conferences together, and it gives us a unique network that we can expedite cases. That's why the insurance companies know to call us, because we can engage the right law enforcement people on these types of cases.
What's interesting, this is Curtis, what's interesting on that is what we've started doing too is piggybacking on Sam and Jeff's success here in North America. We have created a network of Latin law enforcement in countries like Honduras, Guatemala, Costa Rica, Panama. We've been to El Salvador. We do a lot of cases in Mexico. I have a Lieutenant Colonel Garcia Garcix in Mexico City who helps us with anything in Mexico. So we've got the kind of relationships that instead of us stepping on their toes, they really look to us to be the primary source of help when we come in on a case. They look to us to get information, and we look to them to get the type of inside information that we might not be available to us because we're, not in the local area.
We can identify a warehouse. We can identify a bad guy. We can't go and arrest them. So we work with them, and it works well, Glenn. I hope we've answered that.
Yes, you did. That was perfect. Thank you, and I appreciate that. So obviously, the fictitious pickup is a big issue in terms of cargo theft as well. And that's one of the tough ones. I've had the privilege of working with you guys individually on that personally. Can you give our audience some advice on what to do in those situations? I mean, we know that they typically happen on a Friday in an afternoon. They don't know about it until Monday. By then, who knows where the freight can be? You typically have got 24, 48 hours to get a bolo out and get something out there. What any advice or any risk management ideas that you present to them on what to do on this Friday late night pickup stuff?
Sure. There's two aspects to this. What you're asking is how to prevent it and how to battle it if you're a victim. So there's a proactive approach and there's a retroactive approach. From the proactive side, we consider SAFER a system to check it, but SAFER is a safety organization, not a security organization. Keep that in mind. But refer to it. Look at the landline number that's listed. But you have other tools. You have Carrier 411. You have Google. You have other search engines and search sites. If I want to get the correct number for Roanoke, I can go online and look it up. But if I get a call from Joe Blow who says, I work for Roanoke and here's my cell number, and it's a pay-as-you-go number or a throwaway phone, that's untrackable. So on a retroactive basis, that's a very poor choice. I better go to Google or better go to Yahoo or go do a search engine and find out what Roanoke's, or go to a business directory for Long Beach or for Schaumburg, Illinois, and get the correct number. Use a landline number. It really helps. Check out and vet the entity you're hiring. Now, it's easier said than done. I understand there are big brokerage firms who do hundreds and thousands of loads every day, and it's very difficult to vet each and every one. But in the process, also include that you have a landline communication and check the email domain. We talked about both these things. The email domain can change very easily. You've got Roanoke Group as the email domain, but if I put Roanoke Group Limited, Ltd, nobody is going to be able to pick that out as the false one. Curtis had something to add.
It's interesting. Jeff and Sam recently assigned me to a case at the border, and Jeff is talking about landlines along the Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California borders. Be very careful of companies that present themselves to be operating in those border cities who are using a Magic Jack line that looks like a 562 number or a 619 number or a 602 number, when in actuality it's just a Magic Jack that they've assigned the number, and they're working on the other side of the border, and they're part of a criminal network. So those are other things you have to be very careful about. Vetting that landline is critically important.
And with spoofing of numbers, when you look at your ID, it can show you a area code in your area, but it might be coming from even out of the country. It's very difficult to tell.
And also, Glenn, on the fictitious pickup, what we've worked on in the past, and we've worked very close with you on quite a few cases involved, identifying the load like the 3PL, the thieves not really knowing what they target. They just went by certain things about the insurance requirement on the posting being $250,000, team drivers, late week pickup, early week delivery, all those things is what they would look at. That's kind of changed because now we're not getting that with fictitious pickup. We're still getting the loads put online, being bid for, but now the cargo is the means to money. What they'll do is they'll pick up the load, a lot of times even have a legitimate trucker pick it up, and then deliver to a warehouse where it sits. And then after they've picked it up, the person that stole the broker's ID will call and say, hey, we've got your load, but we need some money. I've had a maintenance problem, or we need some gas. So they get T-checks. T-checks become the denominations of anywhere from 500 to 800 to 1,200, 1,700, 1,400. Well, it doesn't sound like a whole lot of money, but when they get it, and you start looking at when they do this across country and you do a cumulative amount, it adds up to a lot of money. Plus, most of these the T-checks are not meeting the threshold of any type of rule of criminality. Police departments don't get involved for if you got hit with an $850 T-check scam. That's the way they're going now. And we've got, matter of fact, as soon as it's over Curtis, I got to scoot down to Orange County and meet with CTIP about a big T-check case we're working here in California. But that's become the new trend as opposed to picking up product.
And to Jeff's statement, if they do 20 of that a day, that's 18 to 20,000 they're making a day, and no law enforcement wants to touch it because it's $1,000 loss.
Exactly.
Excellent. Thank you guys for that advice. Excellent advice. We have a question from the audience here. Because they experienced an unfortunate event. Is that a couple of years ago they had 50 cartons disappear from a New York City standard freight station. Cargo was a unique construction calculator manufactured specifically made for their client. 3 months later, they found these calculators being sold on eBay. What recourse does a freight forwarder have if the cargo is found later on the intranet environment or the internet environment?
One thing that we noticed in missing cargo or pilfered goods is it is still a crime. So if I order 2 Levi's jeans from Sears and only one comes in a box, do I make a police report? No, I call Sears and I say, hey, you short delivered one, and they might replace it. Let's take that to the commercial level. So you had a construction calculator and they had ordered, let's say, 20 of them, and they went missing. Did anyone file a police report? It's most important. At least the victim should file a police report. Then when it shows up on eBay, even if you haven't done an investigation, even if no detective has been assigned and no insurance company investigator is investigating it, when it does show up and it makes their blood boil, they can activate that police department and say, look, we gave you a police report, it's showing up here. Anybody who buys and sells can get that item confiscated. And you can go and track down the IP address and what have you. Perhaps Curtis has something to add.
You know, it's interesting, Glenn and folks, that one of the frustrations that I find is when the victim does exactly the opposite of what Sam just recommended. They do not file a police report. They go to their insurance company to do that whole process, but the problem is at least file a police report, because then that's going to create an anticipation of working on the case, and we can get some good information if law enforcement just takes down the immediate information given. People forget, days go by, they don't write things down. File a police report. That is critically important.
Well, the other thing about a police report is it authenticates the theft. It verifies the theft. And also, Glenn, on issues like that, just keep in mind, and from the person that submitted the question, is that can the goods be identified? I mean, is there a serial number or something unique about that product that can be identified? And the other positive thing about that is eBay is getting better and better about cooperating with law enforcement. A lot of law enforcement people we deal with have established good contacts with eBay. So what used to be a very, very difficult labyrinth of information to get to find out stuff from eBay has been somewhat simplified.
And you know, even if they identify on eBay, if there is no police report, police is not going to get involved. You have to have a police report for police to say, well, there is no police report, there is no criminality reported, so I can't just go to an eBay seller and start bothering them. That's eBay's customer anymore. So you have to have that police report as a link.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. For the audience, just to let everybody know, we will keep the webinar open for a while for any additional questions that might come up. In the meantime, I would again like to thank our wonderful panelists for their participation. They definitely are a wealth of knowledge. Their contact info was previously listed, and of course everybody will get a copy of this presentation. So again, thank you, Captain Sam, thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Curtis. We really appreciate your time and your presentation today.
Thank you all for participating, and also all the cooperation that we get from everyone concerned, because we couldn't do it single-handedly.
And also
thanks everybody for putting aside the time to let us try to educate you and inform you. So I hope it was entertaining and educational.
For those folks on attending the webinar here, please join us for our November 9th for another Risk Management Insight webinar entitled Shipper Contracts and Master Service Agreements. You can register online at www.roanoketrade.com. So again, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. This will conclude our webinar. As I mentioned, we will leave it open for a while should anybody have any additional questions that pop up, and we will send out an FAQ on those questions that may arise with the responses from our panelists. Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful day.